had to learn this a little later in life than I probably would have liked to, and when I have children, it'll probably implement it a little bit sooner. I don't know that enough women are taught how to understand their emotions. Not necessarily the emotion itself, but using the emotions as a compass and not a driving force, right? Understanding, like, okay, I feel this feeling. Why am I feeling it? What is it about this situation that's causing me to feel this? And having the questions behind the feelings instead of allowing your feelings to push you and move you like the wind, right? And I think that's probably the most important thing, because emotions are such fickle and fleeting things that if you're not doing the background work to it, you're a slave to your emotions. And I think that's such a dangerous place for a woman to put herself in, not just in a romantic relationship, but just in life in general, right? I think it's so important to understand how to process what your emotions mean and not to move from a place of emotion, because being emotional is really crucial. That's the thing that creates that balance when you're in a marriage with a man, but not if it's out of control, and not if you don't understand the magnitude or meaning behind it. And I think training that in women younger, from the point where they're girls, I think will create powerhouses when they're older.
That's so good. And that's actually exactly what I do as a coach. And I wish more people knew about it. And what I will say is, in order to do that, something that I would encourage young girls to do, or what I would tell my daughter, is to know how to separate out circumstances from their thoughts. Because sometimes we get emotional thinking that, well, what our thoughts are, that it's happening to us, that it's a circumstance, it's a fact. But actually, when you can separate the two and recognize, actually, this is neutral, and how I'm thinking about it is why I might be feeling angry, that maybe perhaps this person, they didn't text me back right away, perhaps they're busy, then I'm not going to get as irritated with them or think that something's wrong and get all worked up and, you know, anxious. It could be something else. So when you start to gain that awareness, which your prefrontal allows you to do, and watch your thoughts, separating them out gives you so much power and relief in itself. And then, like Ina said, learning how to process your emotions versus reacting or resisting or avoiding, because oftentimes when we, do when we get into bad behavior such as drinking or like over drinking or overeating or drugs or whatever, it's because you're not processing your emotions. You're trying to distract from them, and that's not doing anything, because they're still going to be there regardless. And you're also going to have to deal with the negative consequences on the other side. So just great stuff all across the board.
So Marcus, this will make, so I love that example that you was given. So how do you transition that, right? Because your daughter's young now. So how does that same, technique would work when she gets in high school and she's 16 and got a guy that she's kind of liking? Like, now, how does that transit? Because I think for girls, I think we don't have those talks with our parents like we should, especially our dads, because we see that dads are very uncomfortable talking with their girls about boys and sex and things like that. As a mom, I had no problem telling my daughter like it was from a female perspective, but that's the only perspective that I can give her, is from a female perspective. And not just that, also through my own lens of experiences that I've had, which may not have always been good, or some were good, things like that. But for me, the biggest thing was trying to make a emotional situation logical, was having her write down things like what would she say she likes or would look for in a guy who she would want her to be her boyfriend. And so she would list those things down. And then I said, so anytime that you meet someone, look at this list so you have something tangible. Do they meet those things on this list? So then that way, even if you're feeling a certain way, when you're looking at the list, you can, have something tangible to see if it's just your feelings or if it's something legit. And even in doing that, that didn't work because her feelings overrode everything else.
So, like I said, I'm still in the process of doing it. But when I did it with my wife, I was able to understand that everybody in life has a breaking point. There's something that they want, and if you're the person that provides that, I like using the example that I used earlier with the young lady, right? Because she really wanted me to come over there, and by me leveraging sex at that point in time, I could have made her act or behave in any type of way. So you've got to figure out what their breaking points are all throughout life. So right now it's cookies. It's gonna be a cell phone eventually. It's gonna be time with their friends. It's gonna be all these things. So everything in training is breaking something down from a baby step to create a larger picture.
Mhm.
So I'm just going incrementally. I, that's why I haven't been spanking either, right? I don't know if we talked about this, but I was saying I'm not spanking my kids because I'm using alternative ways of punishment because I'm finding out what they actually care about. It requires work because you got to know what they care about, what's important to them, to then leverage that thing and show them how it benefits them to remove the emotional aspect out of it or to behave correctly, and then reward the positive behavior that you want to see. Everything boils down to negative reinforcement or positive reinforcement. A
Mhm.
lot of times what we do as people is we negatively reinforce. When somebody is acting bad, you typically show them the most attention, right? Those people tend to be the worst type of people because they've associated this behavior with attention. Uh, so if your girl fights with you all the time and you give her sex because she's fighting with you, anytime she wants some D, she just create a fight.
Negative reinforcement.
Negative reinforcement. You just train this person that if they behave in a bad way, they will get the desired result. I think that's the worst thing you can do, and I think that's what most people do because the opposite is harder. To actually stand on it on the line and say, "Nah, the way you behaving right now, you're not getting no D, you're not getting no cookies, you're not getting a ride to X, Y, and Z," and then standing on that, and then taking the effort to make sure you, when they are doing something, you go out your way to give them something. Like, oh,
So one thing I want to touch on real quick. The
That's
other part
applied
of that,
behavior.
the
Right.
other part of that
Mhm.
is having an actual relationship with your daughter, or with that girl, right? You got to have an actual relationship. As for a father and a daughter, you guys hear me say it all the time. You have to be an active participant in their life so that they trust you as they get older, because it becomes a lot less about some of those negative reinforcements, because you've said that earlier. Now it comes to, does she trust what you say? Does she trust what you've done so far? If she trusts what you have said and how you move and what you've done, then she'll be more than willing to come and talk to you, have a real conversation with you about how she's feeling and what she's going through. Like I said, it might have been the stream before the last one. M- My daughter refuses to have any type of boyfriend if they won't meet me. She refuses it because that's just something that we said early, and that's because I've been active and I've participated in her life, and I think that's a big key to it.
I love that. And I really, really appreciate what you've been saying, Marcus. And I just want to talk about like the other side of it, right? Because I think a lot of people are so focused on like, okay, this is the trouble kid, this is the bad kid, and they focus so much on that. And Marcus talked about that negative reinforcement, but the other side of it is that the kid who is behaving gets the least amount of attention. And what does that do? That circles back to what Shan was talking about earlier about why people manipulate, why people move a certain way, right? If you are growing up in a household where good behavior results in just no attention at all, your way of learning to survive comes through manipulation. Well, if I can manipulate the situation to get that attention, well, now I have what I need to keep moving forward, to keep growing, to keep surviving, right? It's not the negative reinforcement isn't just for the child who's receiving the negative reinforcement, but it's also the messaging for the child who's left behind because they are behaving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So basically, the idea is to make sure that you are being focused on making sure you're reinforcing the behavior all around. Because sometimes, even in, like, I used to do ABA therapy. That is part of it in the classroom as well. Like, you'll have certain students that may behave negatively, but you want them to behave, that replacement behavior, to do whatever it is, right? Like, they hopping around, but you want them to stay in their seat. That you do something that's called planned ignoring. So sometimes when they are hopping around out the seat, you don't even say anything to them. You go to the other students that are sitting in their seat and, oh, Johnny, here's a gold sticker. Thanks for sitting in your seat. Oh, Tammy, you're sitting in your seat too. So you're planned ignoring, and you're reinforcing the other ones that are doing the right thing, hoping that the one that's doing the wrong thing will see that and want to be reinforced. So then they'll go and sit down so they can get the gold sticker too. So I guess as a parent, it's important to do that as well. So you're not ignoring those kids, that are doing the right thing. Because it's a handful when you have a what they say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And so sometimes the other kids are seeing that the squeaky wheel is getting the oil. So then they may start squeaking too, because they want some of that attention. So if you plan, to ignore some of that bad behavior and go to the other kids, it's like, oh, you know what? You guys are doing so great. You've behaved. You've listened to all the things I said, all of the things that the other kid isn't doing. You know what? Let's get your coats. We're going to go out for ice cream because
That's
you
me.
guys
That's me all day.
are doing great. And then you leave
Boy,
the kid
I
behind.
don't know.
Yeah, because they're not. And then you have the conversation, next time when you're doing X, Y, and Z, you can come out with and go for ice cream with us next time. And then the next time they are doing that, make sure you follow through.
So that's one way to do it. And I recently saw this video, and I thought it was brilliant. Where this child psychologist was talking about, like, two children in the same household where they have scheduled days to clean their rooms, and they work on, like, an allowance basis. So you complete your chores, you get set amount of allowance, right? And so his thought process was, if the child who did not clean their room, you take a portion of their allowance and you pay the child who did clean their room to clean that room as well. So not only is it positive reinforcement for the child who is performing the behaviors that are necessary, but it's also a negative repercussion, not negative reinforcement, but a negative repercussion for their inaction, right? So there's a multitude of ways that you can handle it. And unfortunately, as a parent, like, you just have to figure out what works for your specific children and their personalities, because their personalities really young, right? You have to figure out what works for your kids. But the idea is to, like, no child left behind. And I know that's become so cliche, but, like, you can't leave any child unattended with no attention at all. Like, that breeds just as much negativity as it does giving the child who does not have good behavior all of the attention.
No, you 100%. So, like, my 1-year-old, she's learning to talk, but you know what she says, please, because her older sister gets ignored until please comes out. So she'll ask me 15 times before I hear the word please. I'll ignore her completely and just sit there. Then when I hear the please, I'll get up. And it's the same thing. Like, the positive reinforcement and, like you say, the negative consequences. It just works. And it's not just for kids. It applies universally. It's even the same thing with jobs, right? When people get bonuses.
Adults, yeah.
It works. People take on the whole, well, I'm not going to reward you for doing what you should be doing aspect. That's one way of going about it. I don't particularly agree with that. I think if you're happy with somebody's service, tip them. If you're happy with something that, she doing right, give her extra affection. If you're happy with what your kids doing, give them extra attention. I definitely believe in rewarding people. So I don't know. That's how I look at it.